Hello everyone, this is Darcinovia. This is a long overdue video that, it took me a while to read this book. The second book of the Song of Ice and Fire, A Clash of Kings. This is the second book in the series, which takes place right where the first one leaves off, and this is dealing with, which is what the exact title says, A Clash of Kings, which there's various storylines going on at once, which if you're familiar with the Song of Ice and Fire, that's what is the main staple of the series. Now, there's new characters that are point of view characters that are in this book. Theon Greyjoy is a point of view character in this book. And the second point of view character is Davos Seaworth. Who is he? Well, if you haven't seen the series in a while, he's eventually becomes the hand of Stannis Baratheon. Now, if you're expecting to read this book and have it be a lot like the HBO series, you're in for something completely different, because the first book of this Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones follows it well. But they deviate so heavily after that it's almost unrecognizable in terms of it doesn't feel like the same story. So when I talk about the story, I'm referring to the book, not the TV show. So anything to do with Robb and not Jane Westerling will not be mentioned here, because Robb is not featured in here. I'm just saying this to those who have never read the book. So then again, if you haven't read the book, why are you watching this review? This is the second. And I may end up spoiling what happens. Now, how do I like this? I think it's better than the first book. I mean, it's very rare when an author writes a sequel that the sequel can surpass the original. It surpasses it in many ways. And, of course, if you're a Dany fan, a fan of Daenerys, she's barely featured in this book. Only 4 point of view chapters with her in there. This basically deals with primarily the main conflict is the conflict between Stannis Baratheon trying to take his rightful place on the Iron Throne, and the Lannisters, focusing on him, considering he's dealing with a war with Robb. Of course, Robb's barely featured in here. Anything that you hear about in Robb is mentioned through ravens. Now, unlike the first book, this book, it becomes much more difficult to choose who you're going to root for, considering, unlike the TV series, which, in my opinion, it's completely dumbed down. The characters feel, like something that you would see in that setting. Like Cersei isn't this nice mother that you see in the series. Tyrion isn't this, don't get me wrong, he's my favorite character, but Tyrion is nothing like he is in the books. Sansa, in my opinion, in the books, is more sympathetic than she is in the series. But then again, you get to hear what goes on in the character's head by reading it. And of course, there's some changes in Arya's storyline as well that they made in the series. Why am I keeping bringing up the HBO series? Because at the time I was reading this book, I was watching the show. And by the time I did this review, I've already got to season 6. And I'm currently reading the 3rd book of Storm of Swords, but the amount of stuff that happens in this book, it's going to be difficult to put this book down, especially if you've never seen the series before. And also, Theon Greyjoy, the guy who we all love to hate. His character is different than it is in the series. He's far less sympathetic in this than he is in the series. I hated Theon Greyjoy when I read this book. Unlike the series, which I may have to explain how I think of the series in another day, but Theon doesn't feel like the same character. Then again, that's what made him interesting to read about. Him betraying the Starks. Because, he's reluctant to do it in the series, unlike the book. And of course, his sister's name has been changed in this. Why am I listing this stuff in this review? Because some people who are watching this never read the books, and I have to assume they haven't read the books. Now, if you haven't read this by now, at least the first book, you should definitely pick up the second one. Now, would I recommend it? Of course I do. I'm sorry if this review feels underwhelming, but it's been so long since I talked about A Song of Ice and Fire that I wanted to get this review up as soon as possible, as soon as I was able to. And honestly, this book, I give it a classic rating. I think it's really good. I'm looking forward to talking about A Storm of Swords, which that's when the series and the books become so distant from each other that it's hard to believe they're telling the same story at this point, which they really are not. And yes, of course, another thing I like to mention is there are certain details that if you don't pay attention closely, you're going to miss on some clues, on some major things that are foreshadowed in the next few books, such as the infamous Red Wedding. So yeah, a great sequel. I can't wait to talk about A Storm of Swords, and when I review it, it's going to be a lot longer than this, because there's a lot more I can talk about. So, have a great day, everyone, and may we live long and prosper. Peace.